A priest is standing over a man whose face has melted, scalp scorched down to the bone, lungs cooked from the inside by toxic fumes. The doctors had told his wife he would not see the morning. 6 weeks later, he was back on a Formula One grid. And that is not even the most incredible part of this story. To understand what Niki Lauda did, you first need to understand who he was before the fire. He was not supposed to be a racing driver. He came from a wealthy Viennese banking dynasty, the kind of family that wanted him in a suit, not a helmet. When they refused to fund his racing, he took out a bank loan secured against his own life insurance policy. That was Lauda's personality in one sentence. Cold logic, no backup plan. Bet on yourself or do not bother. By 1975, he'd won his first world championship with Ferrari. By the summer of 1976, he was destroying the field, leading James Hunt by a massive margin heading into the German Grand Prix. The drivers called him the rat for his teeth. The engineers called him the computer for the way he drove. But a week before the race, Niki Lauda stood up in the drivers' meeting and asked the entire grid to boycott the Nürburgring. It was 14 miles of public road through the Eiffel Forest, tree-lined and unpoliceable by marshals. The drivers called it the Green Hell. Lauda called it a death trap. The vote went against him by 1. On August 1st, 1976, lap 2, the fast left kink before Bergwerk. Lauda's Ferrari 312 T2 snaps to the right. The rear suspension has given way. The car hits an earth bank, ricochets back across the track, engulfed in flames, and is struck by 2 more cars, Brett Lunger and Harold Ertl, plowing straight into the burning wreckage. His helmet is gone, ripped off in the impact. His face is in the fire. He sits there for roughly 45 seconds. Unconscious, breathing in flames. And then something extraordinary happens. 4 drivers, Arturo Merzario, Guy Edwards, Brett Lunger, and Harold Ertl, stop their own race, run back through the flames, and start dragging him out. Merzario reaches into the inferno to release his seatbelts with his bare hands. Without them, there is no comeback story. There is no Niki Lauda. There is just a name on a memorial. Daniele Audetto, Ferrari's team manager, watched the helicopter lift off. He said later that he saw him in the helicopter, and he was thinking, "I'll never see you alive." Mannheim University Clinic, a few hours after the crash. Lauda is in a coma. The burns are horrific, but the doctors aren't worried about his face. They're worried about his lungs. The fumes he inhaled have cauterized the tissue. His body is shutting down. The priest arrives. The Latin begins. Somewhere through the coma, Niki Lauda hears it. "I got so upset," he said years later, "that I put more effort into not dying because of this incident with the priest." That's how he lived. Not through medicine, not through hope. Through rage at a man in a cassock who was already writing him off. By morning, the doctors couldn't explain what was happening. He was stabilizing. He shouldn't have been. In Maranello, Enzo Ferrari was already drawing up contracts for a replacement driver. The first time Lauda looked in a mirror, he saw a stranger. The right side of his face was gone. His ear was partially burned off. His eyelids had to be rebuilt so he could blink. He refused every other piece of reconstructive surgery. Every day in hospital was a day off the grid. Every day off the grid was a day closer to James Hunt winning his championship. Ferrari had signed Carlos Reutemann as his replacement while he was still in bandages. The message was clear: we don't think you're coming back. 42 days after Bergwerk, Niki Lauda walked into the Monza paddock. The press conference was chaos. Photographers swarmed the Ferrari garage. His face was wrapped. Fresh blood was already soaking through the gauze. Jackie Stewart took one look at him and said what everyone was thinking. Niki had no right to be there. He was nowhere near healed. Ferrari had entered 3 cars that weekend: Reutemann, Regazzoni, and him. An insult written in metal. He outqualified both of them, 5th on the grid. In the race, he finished 4th. When he came into the pits and took his helmet off, the balaclava was soaked through with blood. The wounds on his scalp had reopened under the heat of the cockpit. Journalist Nigel Roebuck watched him peel the bloody fabric off his own head in the paddock like it was nothing. It was the most extraordinary return in the history of the sport, and it was also a lie. Years later, in his autobiography, Lauda admitted what nobody saw from the outside. "At Monza, I was rigid with fear," he wrote. "I said then and later that I had conquered my fear quickly and cleanly." That was a lie. He was throwing up in the cockpit, heart pounding, diarrhea, terrified. But he kept racing because Hunt was coming. The McLaren won Canada, then won the United States. The 23-point lead Lauda carried into Germany had shrunk to 3 points by the time the circus landed in Japan for the final race of the season. Fuji Speedway, October 24, 1976. One race for the title. The rain came down in sheets, standing water across half the circuit. Fog, visibility dropping to almost nothing. And Lauda, whose fire-damaged tear ducts couldn't clear the water from his eyes, whose rebuilt eyelids couldn't blink fast enough, simply couldn't see where he was going. He started the race, completed lap 1, pulled into the pits on lap 2, unbuckled his seatbelt, got out. Ferrari offered to fake an engine failure, give him a cover story, save face. He refused. "My life," he said, "is worth more than a title." Hunt finished 3rd, won the championship by a single point. Most people think the story ends there, a beautiful loss, a moral victory. But Niki Lauda wasn't built for moral victories. In 1977, he came back to Ferrari. He won the championship again. He clinched it at Watkins Glen with races to spare. Then he walked out on Enzo Ferrari before the season even ended, because Enzo had signed Reutemann while he lay dying in hospital, and Niki Lauda did not forget things like that. Then, 7 years later, at 35 years old, he walked into McLaren as a teammate to a young Frenchman named Alain Prost. Prost was faster. Everyone knew it. Prost qualified on the front row. Lauda qualified 11th. At the final race of 1984 in Estoril, Prost won 7 races that season, equaling Jim Clark's record. Lauda won 5. Lauda won the championship by half a point. It was the closest margin in Formula One history, before or since. The Nürburgring never hosted another Formula One race on the full Nordschleife. The Green Hell was finished the day his Ferrari caught fire. He carried the damage for the rest of his life, the scarred face he refused to hide. The lungs that finally gave out in 2018, forcing a transplant. The red cap, the one that became his trademark, came from a scalp that never fully healed. Later, he became non-executive chairman of Mercedes. In a hotel room in Singapore in 2012, in his rumpled jeans and that red cap, he convinced Lewis Hamilton to leave McLaren and join a team that had not won anything yet. 6 world championships followed, the most dominant era in modern Formula One history, built in no small part by the man who should have died in a ditch at Bergwerk. He died in 2019, 70 years old. 3 world titles, 1 face he never got back. A priest once stood over his hospital bed and told him it was over. Niki Lauda heard every word, and for 43 more years he made that priest wrong.